Well, this is everything you need to know about front brakes and a whole lot of stuff you don't need to know, but here we go. Now, it's nice to work on the bike at a comfortable height in a relatively clean environment. What I've done here is I've hooked the ratchet strap up to the car hoist above there and down to this corner of the bumper bar and taken the wheel off. Given this brake drum a few hits, come off now and expose reasonable pads. I suspect they're not original and they've been changed. I'm going to inspect this brake cylinder to see if it's salvageable, or I'll buy the cheap Dorman one to replace it, but that'll take a while to get here. There was no cotter pin through this main nut. I've got new wheel bearings for the front axles here. Not that these are probably too bad, but they were cheap enough. There's a low ring on there, it's still in place. This washer that holds the rubber on, which I don't think I've got the rubbers for them, is dented. Should be a bell washer behind it. We'll find out when we take that off. The easiest way to get this nut off is with an impact. I think it's a 30mm impact that would go on there if it wasn't damaged. I think there's a chip on there. It's been hit with a bloody cold chisel by the look of that. Yeah, there's a couple of big chisel marks in that. There's no reason for that to get that bloody tight. I'll probably have to grind a bit of that away before that socket will go on there, and then the impact will rattle that off, even though it will be fairly free to rotate. Because I'm taking the bolt out, I'll then be able to take that spider away to do the bearings, and while I'm at it, then it's easier to get the brake pads organised without the spider in front of them. You can do it with the spider in front, but easier without it. This nut had a few dings in it. That side there, cold chisel's been into it. Took a bit of filing back. I grabbed the file off my lathe that I bought at a farmer's market recently for $15. It's still in pretty damn good shape, really. Just cleaned that up. I can get the impact to go on. I should be holding the spider with my other hand, but let's just need to be holding that spider to rattle that off. Well, the little rattle gun, which is just an impact driver with the adapter out of the King Chrome set to 1/2 inch, would not rattle that nut off. This is fine for putting wheel nuts on, but 30mm nuts on that have been hit on potentially with a cold chisel, it's not moving. I could easily hold the spider there with my hand with the little rattle gun on full noise and it wouldn't rotate, so that's the advantage of a rattle gun. It does try and rattle the nut off. It'll be interesting when I try the big unit. I think these are capable of 1,000 Newton meters, and this little one was the high power impact driver at the time. I think it's capable of 230 or something Newton meters, but not enough to rattle that off, so let's try the big bugger on it. Okay, the big nut's still on there because I can't hold the spider this time with my hand to resist the torque that it's got. What I'm going to do is put the wheel back on now, rather than put the brake drum back on, which has got to push up over the pads there. I've put 3 washers on each of the wheel studs here, so I can put the wheel on, bolt the wheel on, take the weight off my strap there, lower the wheel down to the top of this trolley, and see whether that provides enough resistance. It should do. I didn't even have to put the weight down on this wheel. I've screwed it on. You can see there's no drum there, just spaced out with those washers. Then I've hit the big nut with the impact, with the big impact, and I've loosened it. So that's it. She was still pretty tight on there. I don't know whether they might have been an old, yeah, I think I can see why. There's partial cotter pin still in the hole there, which was probably dragging inside the nut as well. What do we got here? We've got the bell washer, so that's complete. Because I've got new seals and bearings for this front wheel, I started this morning thinking brakes, but maybe I should get the bearings done first. This pin, once you pulled the spider off, now that seemed to be quite tight inside the spider. I put the wheel back on the spider and knocked the wheel forward to get the spider to come out of the bearing there. That pin, I knocked it back initially, and it knocked this cap off the inside of the upright. I don't know whether you can see the one through there on the other side at the back of the upright. There's a cap like this. One thing to note is the grease is all nice, not filthy, in the cap end of this anyway. Now that that cap's out, that pin comes out the back. Because it's been in grease its whole life, it's got a nice silver end and it's nicely plated and in good condition. The oil seal rubs there where my thumb is currently sitting. It's splined into the front hub. A similar spline would appear on the four-wheel drive version, as this one's not a four-wheel drive version. This pin rotates with the wheel, and it needs to, because that's why it's really just a bolt that goes through and holds the wheel on, and it needs to rotate with the hub so that there's not a force put on the castle nut trying to undo it. So that castle nut does not have to be done up nearly as tight as it was. So I've got the bolt out, I've got the spider out. I think I'll go ahead and knock the bearings out and the oil seal out of this hub. First of all, I'll knock them out, and then I might clean everything up so that shit from the cleaning up doesn't get in there. I can clean it out, put new grease in it, new bearings in it. Do the brake repair as well. One thing I'm enjoying is being able to sit here and work at a comfortable height. I've taken the brake slave cylinder off. Obviously the shoes, I've kept the shoes together. The springs, laid them out there pretty much how they came off. One of these clips has a piece on the bottom, the other one doesn't. The configuration of the adjuster, the spring at the big spring at the top, which is standard, but the adjuster's a complex piece of kit that fits in like that. I'll worry about that when I come to put it back on it. It actually looks okay. Slave cylinder itself, I've unbolted it. There's two 10mm nuts in from the back. There's a rubber washer, an oval shaped one that runs around the bottom there. I've folded the cups. There's no leakage from this evident in the brake drum, and those boots seem to be in quite good condition. I've folded them back on themselves at the moment, but the pistons themselves are stuck, I would say. I'm not saying necessarily seized. You can see on the input here where the brake line attaches, there's a bit of crap there, which I'm actually half expecting I can wash these out and tap the cylinders apart. I don't know whether these are original but they're definitely the original Suzuki part. Whether it's the original one from the bike or they've been replaced at some point, I don't know, but if they've been replaced, they've been replaced with original ones. And because the cups and things are in good nick, they may well have been re-kitted at one stage or replaced completely. I'm half expecting that I might be able to reuse those. We'll see whether I find corrosion damage internally. The actual flexible hoses that attach to here had a bit of brake fluid still in them, or some sort of liquid in them. They may be okay. Clean up these backing plates, knock the bearings and oil seals out next. I've decided I'm going to take this back plate off. There's some 12mm screws here, should come out easy. So 4 of them. That'll just make cleaning that so much easier and give me a little bit better vision on the bearing when it comes to the one arm mechanic. There it is. Yeah, a bit of RTV or something on the back of that. The back of those backing plates look good. I've had a bit of a spray in there by the look of it, so that's me. Back of those are good because I've sprayed a bit of gook in there. But anyway, I'm going to clean them on the inside now, and I can clean up the hub a bit better as well. I used my little die grinder and a brush to get in and around that like that, and it's cleaned up pretty good. My first look at this oil seal here is it's half sticking out on this side, and in flush there you can see it's sticking out a bit on this side and in there. I'm going to hook it out, try and get the rear one out so I can get access to the bearings. I've decided not to change these bearings. The front oil seal was sitting in a little bit crooked, but it had a shitload of grease in behind it, possibly holding it out. There's a blob of grease still in there, but there's a lot of grease in behind it, which was probably not allowing it to go back fully. The other oil seal is what I've seen other people refer to as double lip, which they're hard to come by. They're similar to what's used rear axle. They've got that lip sticking out the front. Now this is all fresh grease. No, I think I've just picked up a bit of sawdust or something there from it laying on the table. But that oil seal is in perfect shape because of the dust cap there that goes on behind it. There's no opportunity for dirt to get into it. In running the spider now up and down in there, it actually fits and rotates perfectly. I was in sort of two minds. I've got new bearings and I've got new seals. I was thinking, oh, I could put these used bearings aside and keep them for another occasion for one of the other bikes potentially. I'm thinking, why go to the work of repacking these with new grease and new bearings and new seals when what's there seems perfectly fine. What I'm going to do now that I've got this off is I'm going to clean that spider up a little bit, polish it up, push the original oil seals, which weren't damaged when I hooked them out a minute ago, back into this bearing, fit the spider and the bolt, say that that's the bearing done. It's certainly been inspected and approved in my mind. I've had this backing plate off and I've had a good look at the bearings and actually refitted the oil seals that I knocked out because I'm happy with the bearings. I've put that plate back on the back, the cover on the back, and I've got the axle in place there. I've had this backing plate on the wire wheel and with this little die grinder brush and cleaned it up a bit. I want to give it a shot of paint and then go and have some lunch. So those bolts there have also been buffed up. They come up like new, you know, they look like shit and then they buff up like new, so that's sort of a little bit inspiring. I've masked up the centre of that and the axle so I can shoot it with paint. That's the next thing I'll do. There's probably a couple of spots in the back there that I'll fire a bit of paint in from the back while I'm at it. I've wiped over the whole lot there with a rag that had a bit of degreaser, paint degreasing fluid on it, which gets rid of the dust and the grease. I've been using greasy hands to set the bearing and the oil seals. Hopefully that helps the paint stick a bit better. Well, it looks pretty good while it's still wet. I think there's big drips in the bottom there. It's inside a brake drum. It's there to try and prevent further corrosion. I've got this wheel cylinder just clamped in the vise here. The cylinder, the actual piston is jammed at the moment. I can't push it or pull it. I notice it's not parallel to the back plate at the moment. The cylinder, the pad must have been, the pad's not as thick as that slot, so it must have been able to work slightly cocked around like that. I've got a bit of this, that's what I was using to fix those wheels, and I've just made that fit into that slot. And rather than try and push or pull the cylinder at this stage, I just wanted to twist it. Now I can't twist that with my hands at the moment, so the piston's stuck. But with that in there, a big shifting spanner, I'm going to just try and straighten it up. I probably can't do that while I'm holding the phone. If I can get that to twist round, you know, just a few degrees, that means the piston is free, and then I can try see whether I can actually push it out as well. So I got those pistons turning. They weren't wanting to push out or push or pull. I turned them round and round quite a few times before they became free enough to be able to be just wound by hand around like that. And then I thought the best way to get them to come out is, rather than push from one side, was to see if they would move with a bit of air pressure behind them. So I put a little O-ring like that down the hole over I put the bleeder in to block that hole. I put a little O-ring down the hole here, used the nozzle of my air gun, put a bit of air pressure down there, and the little O-ring that I'd put in there just helped seal that nozzle in there. And then with the one hand holding the piston so they didn't fly around the workshop if they were going to move, I used the other hand to pulse a bit of air in there, and I found that both pistons were I could feel the pressure on both pistons. They were both rocking a little bit. I gave it a longer squirt. One piston blew out. I blew out as far as it was still caught by the rubber boot on the outside, but just enough to know that it had moved. There's a spring behind it, so the other piston there currently was moving a fraction, but it wasn't. It's like it's got some resistance still to move out. I'm going to use a punch now from behind just to tap it out, and then I'm going to clean up the rubber and see what the bore in here is like. I've got some brake clean to clean it all out and see whether they're reusable. I think at this stage they probably are going to be. I've tried to clean up these cylinders. I've sort of run my finger right up inside the bore there, and I think that's pretty much just sort of decoloration around there. It's not deep pitting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get some hand cleaner that's got some gritty bits in it and put it on my finger. It's called citric hand cleaner with, well, you'd sort of think sandy bits in it. I'm just going to dip that over my finger. My pinky finger is a fairly tight fit, and I can get it most of the way in that hole. I can work from both sides, and I'm going to just use a little bit of abrasive that's in the hand cleaner that I use to try and move a bit of that material. But that's all that's sticking. Is you can see a bit of a brown stripe there, which is the worst bit, and that's come in from the outside. It's not come from the inside down the bore. It's cleaner towards the centre because it's had a bit of brake fluid still in it. That's the cylinder. The actual pistons, I've given these a wire brush at the rusty end and carefully wire brushed up to the rubber around there, and they actually fit this way inside the cylinder quite happily. The rubber part of those is going to be the only part really touching the walls. The rubber hasn't got score marks in it, in reasonably good condition. I think quite serviceable. Same on this end. I can't get the wire brush into that groove or various parts, but so I wire brushed the outside of this, and it's looking good. You can't get the wire brush in little spots there. I'm not going to particularly worry about that, but appearance wise it's nice to be putting what looks like new parts back together. I've only bothered doing that because I figure I'm going to be able to make it work. Well, that was one of my better ideas. I was saying how my pinky finger fitted pretty neatly into that hole. It with a bit of citric hand cleaner with the little beads in it that help you wash your hands. I had that smeared over my finger, and I gave this cylinder a bit of a hone with my finger, and it must be a pretty light hone because otherwise you'd be wearing your finger away. It's left that bore pretty damn clean. It looks good, and it wasn't abrasive like sand. I think it is a plastic bead or something that they have in that hand cleaner. I don't know what it is, but it did pick up. I think that there might be the remains of the line that I showed before. It's this indetectable sort of ridge where that is, probably very minor corrosion pitting there, but it's right up at the top. It's good. This cylinder looks good, and I'm happy with the shape of the pistons. Anyway, I'm going to reassemble that, use a little bit of brake fluid as I push them back together, bolt them back onto the back plate. Well, that's the brake parts back in, I believe, the way they came out. There's the adjuster here is an interesting thing. That's in its thinnest position. That's the self-adjusting nature of the brake. This cleaned up, and these other bits wire brushed. I've got the spider out of the way at the moment so you can see things. I've fitted a new cotter pin here. I've attempted to straighten out that washer that holds the rubber cover. Everything's turning well. I didn't replace the bearings and put the old seals back in that I knocked out. Used the wire wheel inside this drum to knock a bit of the dirt off it. I've got the brake adjuster set back to minimum, so it's holding currently the pads are in as far as they can be. I'm going to put this brake drum on. The easiest way I find is to line the studs up horizontally, because you can't see them when you've got the drum over the top. Manipulate the drum to go over. And I know a lot of people have trouble putting the drum over new pads. Well, I don't know that these are new pads, but they're pretty new. I'm going to put the wheel on. I had the O-ring on around there. So I can now put the wheel on, and this corner's done. I won't know that it's actually braking properly until I connect hydraulics to it, but I think it'll be fine. So that's that wheel on. Brake drum, you can hear it drag a little bit. That's because the shoes aren't evenly pressed out against the drum. Once the pressure comes on and it's pumped a bit, the shoes will push out into the drum and touch the drum evenly, and then should back off just a fraction to give it clearance. That wheel's rolling nicely. I've got a washer under each of the lug nuts. I don't think I actually have rubber covers for the centre of these. I haven't got them from the front. The fronts didn't even have cotter pins in them. I put a new cotter pin in. We'll look for something that can cover them adequately. That's the left hand side done. Get out to your shed and have some fun.